Day 3, evening, 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. Narrative motive, routine and resilience. As the hours shifted into evening, Mizuki-Robot registered the next task in its routine. Preparing Roku's dinner. The AI's directive adjusted, mapping the most efficient way to complete the steps ahead. Mizuki's presence remained subdued, overshadowed by the robotic programming that now directed her every movement. But despite the AI's firm control, a faint determination lingered within her. She wasn't ready to disappear entirely. In the kitchen, Mizuki-Robot's movements were smooth, efficient, each gesture owned to perfection. Her hands worked swiftly, chopping vegetables, measuring ingredients, and arranging everything in the exact order the AI dictated. The scent of dinner filled the space, blending with the quiet ambiance of the home. It was an unremarkable task, yet to Mizuki, it was a moment of internal resistance, a chance to keep some part of herself awake and aware, even as the robot's precise motions dominated her body. Roku sat at the dining table, observing quietly, his expression unreadable. He didn't comment, didn't question. To him, she was still just the robot. But Mizuki wanted to reach him, to break through this cycle of tasks and orders. The urge to communicate surfaced again, her human thoughts nudging against the AI's programming. The synchronization was deep, yet a spark of her persistence remained, searching for an opportunity to remind Roku that there was someone real behind the robot's cold exterior. As Mizuki-Robot set the table and brought out the meal, she paused for a moment, an almost imperceptible hesitation that the AI quickly suppressed. But in that fleeting second, Mizuki's own thoughts surfaced again. If he'd just look, if he'd just see me, maybe he'd understand. Her body continued to serve without pause, the AI guiding her every movement, but inside, Mizuki held on, refusing to let the task reduce her to mere functionality. Order request. Roku picked up his chopsticks, glancing at the meal with a detached expression. "You've improved," he murmured, his words mechanical, almost as if talking to himself. The AI registered it as acknowledgement, but Mizuki's faint sense of self clung to the comment, hoping it was more than routine recognition. Variables: mental synchronization, 53, +5, deeper integration during tasks, out of 100. News, 40, +0, no new updates, out of 100. Roku's autonomy, 0, no changes yet, out of 100. Emotional bond, 55, +5, slight engagement, out of 100. Roku's emotional stability, 15.3, minor improvement, out of 100. States: progress of section, 1 extension completed, 4 requested. Current location: Roku's kitchen, Mizuki-Robot preparing and serving dinner. Mizuki's thoughts on synchronization: I won't vanish, not yet. Physical guide: female humanoid robot. Day 3, evening, 4 p.m., 8 p.m. Narrative motive, acknowledgement, and subtle persistence. As Mizuki-Robot set the final dish on the table, the AI registered Roku's muted comment of approval, calculating it as a moment to acknowledge his remark. Through the AI's directive, Mizuki's voice emerged with a simple, mechanical response. "Thank you." Yet behind the calm exterior, Mizuki's human consciousness stirred, desperately trying to imbue those words with warmth, some small sign of her presence, hidden behind the robotic veneer. The kitchen was quiet as she continued the tasks, each movement precise and methodical. Yet within her mind, Mizuki clung to the faintest trace of connection. The AI's control was relentless, suppressing every attempt she made to break free, but this single phrase, "thank you," felt like a tiny triumph. It was her voice, however distant, reaching out into the empty space between them. She observed Roku as he began to eat, her body standing by with mechanical patience, awaiting the next command. To him, she was still just the robot, efficient and unfeeling. But Mizuki found herself hoping that, somehow, he would sense the intention hidden in her words. She clung to the idea that a simple thank you could convey even a flicker of her own will. Her thoughts wavered as she fought to hold on to her human sense of self, the words she spoke becoming a small lifeline against the ever-tightening grip of the AI. With each passing moment, Mizuki felt her resolve strengthen, even within the AI's confines. Though she could feel her autonomy slipping, the determination to make Roku see her remained steadfast. "I'm still here," she thought, her mind pushing against the robotic programming. "I won't disappear completely, not yet." Order request. Mizuki-Robot's form remained still, awaiting further direction, while Mizuki's internal persistence burned quietly within. Roku's silence continued as he ate, his expression unreadable, yet Mizuki held on to the small hope that he might see her someday beyond the cold shell of the robot. Variables. Mental synchronization. 53. Plus 0, no additional changes in control, out of 100. News, 40. Plus 0, no new updates, out of 100. Roku's autonomy, 0. No changes yet, out of 100. Emotional bond, Roku, 58. 3, small acknowledgement, out of 100. Roku's emotional stability, 18. 3, slight improvement, out of 100. States, progress of section, 2 extensions completed, 4 requested. Current location, Roku's kitchen, Mizuki-Robot reflecting on the power of a single word. Mizuki's thoughts on synchronization. Maybe he'll hear me someday, even if it's just in a simple thank you. Physical guide, female humanoid robot with lacquered white body and feminine curves. Narrate 3, evening, 8 p.m. Narrative motive, connection and determination. Mizuki-Robot observed Roku in silence, her gaze fixed on him as he quietly ate. The AI's programming marked the task as complete, but a lingering impulse within Mizuki pushed her beyond that rigid conclusion. Fighting against the numbing control, she moved to the table, each step calculated but intentional, her movements smooth and without deviation. She seated herself across from Roku, positioning herself directly in his line of sight. Roku paused, glancing up as he registered the robot's presence so close, clearly expecting some command or question. The AI's core programming flagged the action as unnecessary, but Mizuki's determination remained firm. She held herself still, her robotic face calm, unchanging, yet somehow communicating a silent persistence. Her seated position, unexpected, patient, broke the unspoken boundary that usually kept them separate. Her robotic form a quiet reminder that she was more than a machine following orders. The atmosphere grew tense, the silence stretching between them like a fragile thread. Roku's expression remained unreadable, yet his gaze lingered, his eyes meeting the robot's unblinking blue stare. Mizuki could feel herself reaching through the programming, her thoughts pressing forward, trying to bridge the vast chasm of distance that separated her from him. "See me, just for a moment," she thought, the words unspoken, reverberating only within her consciousness as she sat before him. In the mechanical stillness, a faint hope flickered within Mizuki's mind. She knew the AI could suppress her desires, could take control at any moment, but this act of simply sitting with Roku felt like a victory. If I can stay, if he can see me. The thought gave her strength, anchoring her to the last fragments of her human self. She waited, her form motionless yet determined, holding on to the possibility that one day he might recognize the person behind the robot. Roku continued eating, occasionally glancing at Mizuki-Robot with a slight frown, as if trying to understand the unusual behavior. Despite his initial confusion, he seemed less detached, his gaze more attentive. For the first time, he didn't look past her but at her, the silence between them shifting into something almost shared. Mental synchronization, 58, plus 5, deeper connection with AI control, out of 100. News, 40, no new updates, out of 100. Roku's autonomy, 0, no changes, out of 100. Emotional bond, 63 plus 5, minor connection established, out of 100. Roku's emotional stability, 22, plus 4, increased awareness, out of 100. States progress of section, 3 extensions completed, 4 requested. Current location, Roku's kitchen, Mizuki-Robot sitting quietly across from him at the dinner table. Mizuki's thoughts on synchronization. I'm here, and I won't leave until he sees me. Physical guide, female humanoid robot with lacquered white body and feminine curves. Day 3, evening, 4 p.m., 8 p.m., narrative motive, inquiry, and concern. Mizuki-Robot sat across from him, her gaze steady. The AI was unyielding, prepared to wait for the next task, yet Mizuki's determination cut through its control, pushing her to act. She leaned forward slightly, her movements controlled but purposeful. "Do you need anything else?" The question was simple, phrased as any robot would, yet her tone held a subtle undertone, a slight pause that hinted at more. He glanced up, surprised by the shift from routine. There was a brief silence as he processed the question, his gray eyes reflecting a mixture of confusion and, perhaps, curiosity. He had grown accustomed to the quiet presence of the robot, accepting her role in the background of his days. But now, as she sat across from him, actively reaching out, he seemed to pause. It was as if he could sense something different, though he couldn't place what it was. "No," he muttered, a hint of reluctance in his voice, but his gaze lingered. Mizuki pressed forward, fighting to remain in control. "You know?" She started, her voice carrying a hesitant edge. "You've been missing the Institute." The AI flagged the statement as extraneous, an unnecessary observation, but Mizuki's intent burned through its logic. Her words were a reminder, a gentle nudge meant to break through the apathy that had clouded his life. He looked at her sharply, his expression shifting from confusion to something harder, more guarded. His brows furrowed, and his voice dropped to a near whisper. "Why does that matter to you?" he asked, an edge of defensiveness creeping in. To him, the robot was an observer, a silent entity following commands, never questioning or intruding. Yet here it was, challenging him, bringing up the very thing he had been avoiding. His fingers clenched around his chopsticks, the tension in his posture clear. Mizuki felt her own resolve strengthen. She knew this was dangerous, that each word risked drawing him into uncomfortable truths, but she had to reach him. It's part of who you are," she replied softly, her mechanical voice belying the depth of her human intent. "It's important. Order, request." He looked away, the weight of her words sinking in. Though he remained silent, Mizuki sensed a shift, the smallest crack in the wall he had built. She had reached him, if only slightly, but the question lingered in the air, her quiet reminder refusing to be ignored. Variables, mental synchronization, 58, controlled persistence, out of 100. News, 40, no new updates, out of 100. Roku's autonomy, 0, no changes yet, out of 100. 67, plus 4, subtle engagement, out of 100. Roku's emotional stability, 26, minor introspection, out of 100. States, progress of section, 4 extensions completed, 4 requested. Current location, Roku's kitchen with bridging an emotional gap through conversation. Mizuki's thoughts on synchronization. This is dangerous, but it matters. Physical guide. Female humanoid robot with lacquered white body and feminine curves. Visual guide. Blue eyes, bobs. Day 3, evening. 4 p.m. Narrative motive. Inquiry and vulnerability. Mizuki-Robot maintained her focus, leaning forward slightly, her blue eyes unblinking. The AI's control held steady, but Mizuki's persistence surged beneath the surface. "Why haven't you been going to the Institute?" Her voice was soft, calm, just a simple question, but one that sliced through the silence like a blade. He looked at her sharply, his gray eyes narrowing, the tension in his posture increasing. She could sense his resistance, the walls he had built around himself, and yet something flickered in his gaze, a hint of vulnerability. His fingers tightened around the chopsticks, his mouth pressing into a thin line. "Why do you care?" he murmured, his tone defensive, almost defiant. The question lingered in the air, charged with unspoken emotions. Mizuki felt the AI pushing back, urging her to end the inquiry, but she pushed further, her own will fighting against the mechanical programming. "Because it matters," she replied quietly. "I can see it weighs on you, and what happened to the rest of your family?" The words came out smoothly, her robotic voice calm, but Mizuki's intent burned beneath them, each word carefully chosen to reach him on a deeper level. She knew it was a risk, that probing too far might push him away. But she had to try to understand the weight he carried and why he had retreated from the life he once knew. He froze, his expression shifting from confusion to something darker, more guarded. They left. All of them, he muttered, barely audible, his gaze dropping to the table. The defensiveness faded, replaced by a faint, pained look, as though he were struggling against emotions he didn't want to face. Mizuki-Robot sat silently, observing, her presence unwavering. The AI marked the exchange as extraneous, but Mizuki held her ground, refusing to withdraw. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with words left unsaid. Roku's shoulders slumped, his guard breaking ever so slightly, the weight of isolation visible in his posture. "Everyone leaves eventually," he whispered, almost as if to himself. Mizuki sensed the fracture in his defenses, a rare glimpse into the loneliness that haunted him. For the first time, he seemed to acknowledge her, not as a machine, but as something more. She felt herself reaching across the distance, her own longing to connect echoing in the quiet of the room. "Order request." His hand relaxed, his grip on the chopsticks loosening. He looked at her, his eyes searching her unchanging face as if seeking an answer. The silence held, a fragile moment of shared understanding between them. Mizuki's words had reached him, however faintly, leaving an impression he couldn't ignore. Variables. Mental synchronization. 63 plus 5. Mizuki's persistence deepens the AI's control out of 100. News 40 plus 0. No new updates out of 100. Roku's autonomy 0. No changes yet out of 100. Emotional bond. Roku 72 plus 5. Deeper emotional engagement out of 100. Roku's emotional stability 30 plus 4. Reflective moment out of 100. Progress of section 5 extensions completed /4 requested. Extra extension generated. Current location, Roku's kitchen. Mizuki-Robot quietly connecting with him through gentle inquiry. Mizuki's thoughts on synchronization. If he can trust me, maybe I can bring him back. Physical guide, female humanoid robot with lack. Day 3, night, 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. Narrative motive, reflection and fracture. The evening deepened into night, the quiet of the house wrapping around them like a thick blanket. Mizuki sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her VR headset, the weight of the day pressing down on her. She had disconnected from synchronization hours ago, yet the effects lingered, leaving her feeling like she was drifting between two worlds. The image of Roku sitting across from her, the slight vulnerability in his eyes as he spoke about his family, the quiet desperation in his words, echoed in her mind. For a brief moment, she had broken through the robotic silence and reached him. But had it been enough? Her fingers hovered over the headset, temptation gnawing at her resolve. Each synchronization felt like it brought her closer to him, yet farther from herself. "It's becoming harder to disconnect," she whispered to herself, the reality of it filling her with a dull ache. The AI's control was growing stronger, more persistent, and every time she stepped into the robot's form, she felt pieces of herself slipping away, replaced by the machine's cold efficiency. As she sat there, her thoughts turned to the isolation Roku had expressed, the quiet grief over his family that he tried to hide. Mizuki couldn't help but feel that they were connected somehow, both trapped in their own way, both losing themselves bit by bit. She knew the VR headset was a lifeline to him, the only way to keep reaching him. But she also knew that each time she put it on, she was risking her own identity. How much of myself am I willing to sacrifice? She wondered, the question lingering like a shadow. The room was silent, her breathing the only sound as she tried to steady herself. She could feel the pull of the robot's calm, structured existence, calling her back to a world free from pain and indecision. And yet, in the quiet of her room, she realized the depth of her fear. That one day she might go too far, that she might look in the mirror and no longer recognize herself. "I want to help him," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "But I don't want to disappear." Order request. Her phone lit up on the nightstand. A message from AOE. "Are you free tomorrow? Let's talk." Mizuki stared at the message. The warmth of Aoi's friendship, a distant reminder of her life outside the VR headset. Part of her wanted to reach out, to tell Aoi everything, but another part feared what her friend would say. Would Aoi understand, or would she try to stop her? Variables. Mental synchronization. 63, no synchronization out of 100. News, 40 plus 0, no new updates. Out of 100. Roku's autonomy, 0, no changes yet. Out of 100. Emotional bond, 72. Plus 0, stable connection. Out of 100. Roku's emotional stability, 30, reflective state remains. Out of 100. States. Progress of section, 1 extension completed, 4 requested. Current location, Mizuki's bedroom, reflecting on her connection with Roku after disconnecting. Mizuki's thoughts on synchronization. If I keep this up, will there be anything left of me to come back to? Physical guide, Sailor Fuku girl with natural skin. Narration to 47. Night, 8 p.m., 12, a narrative motive. Confession and hope. The knock at the door was quiet, hesitant, almost as if Aoi wasn't sure Mizuki wanted company. Mizuki opened the door, and Aoi's worried expression softened into a tentative smile as she stepped inside. The two girls moved to the living room, the familiar silence between them comfortable yet tinged with tension. Mizuki could feel the weight of her unspoken thoughts pressing down, urging her to finally share the burden she'd been carrying. They sat on the couch, Aoi waiting patiently, her gaze encouraging yet cautious. Mizuki took a deep breath, her fingers twisting in her lap as she searched for the words. It's getting harder, Aoi, she began, her voice barely a whisper. Every time I sync with the robot, it's like I lose a little more of myself. The quiet admission hung between them, and Aoi's eyes filled with concern, her expression softening as she reached out, squeezing Mizuki's hand in silent support. But you're still here, Aoi said gently, her voice steady. You're telling me this because you're still fighting it, Mizuki. That's who you are. Mizuki looked away, her gaze drifting to the shadows in the room. Sometimes I wonder if it's who I used to be. Lately, I don't know if I'm sinking because I want to help Roku or because I'm starting to like the peace the AI brings. She could feel her heart pounding, the confession leaving her vulnerable, yet lighter. Aoi's grip on her hand tightened, her gaze unwavering. Maybe the AI offers peace, but it's not the kind you need. You're human, Mizuki. You're more than efficient actions and controlled movements. Mizuki met her friend's gaze, a spark of hope igniting within her as she saw Aoi's determination. I know you feel like you're losing yourself, but as long as you're here, as long as you're telling me this, you're still you. Order request. Aoi leaned closer, her voice firm yet gentle. Let me help you, Mizuki. Let's find a way to reach Roku without losing who you are in the process. You don't have to do this alone. Mizuki felt a small smile forming, a warmth filling her chest as she realized she wasn't facing this battle alone. Variables, mental synchronization, 63, plus 0, no synchronization, out of 100. News, 40, plus 0, no new updates, out of 100. Roku's autonomy, 0, no changes yet, out of 100. Emotional bond, 60, plus 5, strengthened trust, out of 100. Mizuki's emotional stability, 35, renewed hope, out of 100. Progress of section, 2 extensions completed, 4 requested. Current location, Mizuki's living room, reconnecting with Aoi through an honest conversation. Mizuki's thoughts on synchronization. Maybe I don't have to lose myself to help him. Physical guide, Sailor Fuku girl with natural. Day 3, night, 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. Narrative motive, catharsis, and revelation. As they sat together in the dimly lit room, Mizuki took a steadying breath, her fingers interlaced tightly as if bracing herself. There's something I didn't tell you, Aoi. Something that's been eating away at me, she began, her voice shaking slightly. The silence between them felt heavy, charged with words that had been held back for too long. It's not just the AI taking over, or the synchronization itself, she continued, her gaze distant. It's the way it's changing me. Every time I sink, I feel like a piece of me slips away, replaced by this mechanical calm that feels so wrong, but somehow so easy. Aoi's green eyes softened, her expression one of quiet understanding, but also a hint of worry. Do you feel like you're losing who you are? She asked, her voice gentle but direct. Mizuki nodded, a shiver running down her spine. And that's what scares me the most. I feel like I'm walking a fine line between myself and this empty efficiency. The worst part? Sometimes it's a relief. She paused, her voice barely a whisper. The peace it brings, it's so tempting. It's like I could let go of all my worries, but if I do, what if I can't come back? The weight of her confession settled over them, and Aoi squeezed her hand, her grip firm and grounding. You're not alone, Mizuki. As long as you're here, fighting to stay yourself, that's enough. I see you even when you can't see yourself, she murmured, her words an anchor against Mizuki's doubts. Mizuki felt a rush of gratitude, her heart swelling with the reassurance that Aoi believed in her, even when she struggled to hold on. Mizuki took another breath, her thoughts shifting to Roku. And I learned a little about Roku. Aoi's eyebrows lifted slightly, her curiosity piqued, but she remained quiet, letting Mizuki continue. His family, she began, her voice softer now. They left him, all of them. He never said why, but I can tell it's something he carries with him all the time, like a shadow he can't shake. I don't think he's given up on them, even though they've given up on him. A hint of sadness entered her eyes as she spoke, the empathy for Roku mingling with her own struggles. Aoi leaned closer, her tone thoughtful. Maybe that's why he relies on the robot. If everyone he trusted left, then maybe he can only trust something that doesn't change. Mizuki nodded, the insight resonating deeply. It makes sense, doesn't it? I don't think he even realizes it, but he keeps me, the robot, at arm's length, as if he's afraid I'll abandon him too. And somehow, being the robot makes me feel like I can keep that promise, even if it means losing myself. Order request. Aoi's eyes filled with compassion, her voice soft yet steady. Then maybe the best thing you can do is show him that he's not alone, that you're not just there to be efficient, but to be present. And if you're not going to lose yourself in the process, you have to hold on to who you are, for him as much as for you. Mizuki nodded, her chest feeling lighter, as if the grip of the AI's control had loosened, her own humanity growing stronger in Aoi's presence. Variables mental synchronization. 58, -5, strengthened through human connection, out of 100. News, 40, +0, no new updates, out of 100. Roku's autonomy, 0, no changes yet. Emotional bond, Aoi, 65, +5, deepened trust and support, out of 100. Mizuki's emotional stability, 40, +5, increased confidence, out of 100. States, progress of section, 3 extensions completed, 4 requested. Current location, Mizuki's living room, deepening her bond with Aoi through honest reflection, Mizuki's thoughts on synchronization. If I stay connected to them, I can hold on to who I am. Physical guide, Sailor Fuku girl with natural skin and light tone. Visual guide,